and welcome to my horror story channel. I hope you're all doing well, because tonight things are about to get terrifying. Are you ready? Let's begin. In Casablanca, Morocco, there was a village near a place called Zankat al-Arakat, known as a commercial market where supplies for magic and sorcery were sold, including skulls, animal heads, magic books, and other items related to the occult. Let's return to this village, where a tailor named Saeed lived. He was the most famous tailor in the entire region, known for his impeccable work and the wealth of experience he had gained over 30 years in his trade. Women from all surrounding areas came to him to have their clothes made. One day, after a long day's work, Saeed began packing up his tools and preparing to go home, as his shift had ended. To his surprise, at around 1 o'clock in the morning, a girl entered his shop and asked him to tailor a dress for her. Saeed politely asked, "Could you come back tomorrow? I've already finished for the day." However, the moment the girl entered, Saeed felt a strange sensation, a feeling he had never experienced before. He felt an eerie coldness in his bones, combined with an overwhelming sense of awe toward the girl. The girl looked unusual. Her skin was unnaturally pale, and her face was white and lifeless, with no trace of blood, almost resembling that of a corpse. She wore a long black abaya that covered her legs and touched the ground. When Saeed suggested she return the next day, the girl responded in a deep, rough voice. "I can't wait until tomorrow. I've traveled from far away specifically to have you make this dress," she added. "You won't tire of this dress because I've worked on it before for someone else, so it will be easy for you. But when I heard about your clean work, I decided to have you finish it. You are the best tailor in this area." Saeed felt uneasy about her voice and the overall situation, but after a brief moment he reasoned with himself. Maybe this is just her normal voice. Not wanting to disappoint her, he agreed, "All right, I'll take your measurements now, and you can come back in 2 days to pick up your dress." Saeed got up, grabbed his measuring tape, and asked the girl to turn around so he could measure the distance between her shoulders. However, as he got closer, he felt an unusual heat radiating from her, and a sulfur-like scent filled the air. The sensation made him uneasy, but he tried to keep his composure, not wanting to show fear. He took the measurements, wrote them down, but because of the tension, he felt he had made a mistake in the numbers. So he decided to measure again. To his surprise, when he measured a second time, the numbers were different. Realizing he had made an error, he thought, "Let me measure once more, just to be sure." When he measured for a third time, his hair stood on end in terror, as the measurements were different again. At this point, Saeed fell silent, gathering his composure, and muttered to himself, "All right, I'll measure her height." Saeed crouched down to measure her height, from her feet to her head. "Do you remember how I mentioned her long black abaya that touched the ground, hiding even her slippers?" As Saeed approached her feet to take the measurement, the girl suddenly turned and said loudly, "There's no need to come near my feet or slippers. It's better if you stay away." Saeed, feeling more uneasy than before, apologized, "I'm sorry," and stepped back. After that, the girl pulled out a piece of fabric from her bag and said, "This is the fabric I want you to use for the dress." As soon as Saeed touched the fabric, his expression changed. He was stunned. Having worked for over 30 years, he had never encountered such a fabric in his life. The material felt strangely cold. Colder than the air around him, it seemed to pulse, with an energy that was otherworldly, and its texture was unlike anything he had ever felt. Unnatural, almost as if it were alive. Saeed hesitated, feeling an inexplicable fear wash over him. "What is this fabric?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The girl didn't respond immediately. She stepped closer, moving as silently as a shadow. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold, almost detached. "This fabric comes from a place far from here, a place where time and space do not exist as they do in this world. Only someone like you, skilled in the art of tailoring, can shape it into the form I desire." Saeed's heart raced. He had seen all kinds and colors of fabrics, but this one was completely unfamiliar. This piece of fabric was jet black, and it emitted a smell similar to that of something burning. The texture was extremely rough. At this point, the tailor became both afraid and nervous, his forehead starting to sweat. He forced a smile at the girl, trying to reassure himself that everything was normal. He looked at the girl and said, "Wow, this fabric, and it must have been brought from outside." But the girl didn't respond, remaining silent and staring at him with cold, unblinking eyes. The tailor felt embarrassed, and at the same time, he quickly decided to send her away and said, "Okay, your dress will be ready in 2 days, God willing." She didn't reply, merely leaving the shop. Saeed gathered his things and left the shop, heading down the street toward his home. As he walked, something nagged at him. He remembered that the girl had come to him very late at night, alone. It struck him as odd. Why would a girl come to a tailor at such an hour, especially alone? He couldn't help but obsess over the matter, wondering why she hadn't been accompanied by anyone, whether a man or another woman. It felt strange, even dangerous, but he quickly dismissed the thought, realizing it wouldn't be appropriate to ask her about such personal matters. He decided that his role was to sew her dress, nothing more, nothing less. By the time Saeed reached home, he lay down on his bed, but his mind was far from at rest. His head swirled with questions. Who was this girl? Why had she come so late at night? Why was her face like that? And why was her abaya so long? The more he thought about it, the more unsettled he became. He tried to rationalize everything. Maybe the girl had an illness that caused her pale complexion. Perhaps she didn't want anyone to see her legs due to some condition, which explained the long abaya. Her strange voice? Maybe it was just a condition she'd had since childhood. Saeed tried to convince himself with these explanations, hoping they would help him sleep. Eventually, he calmed himself and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Saeed went to his shop as usual. The first thing he always did when entering the shop was play the Quran on the radio. He started working, and then he remembered the piece of fabric for the girl's dress, which was due in 2 days. He decided to start working on it. But when he went to use his sewing machine, something strange happened. The machine, which had never failed him before, simply wouldn't work. He inspected it, trying to find the issue, but couldn't identify the problem. He moved it around, trying different things, but no matter what he did, the machine remained broken. He spent the entire day troubleshooting, but by nightfall, he was still unable to fix it. Feeling defeated, he decided to rest and come back in the morning to try again. That night, just as he was about to leave, the girl entered the shop. She had the same lifeless expression she had worn the night before. She didn't greet him, nor did she ask about his well-being. Instead, she simply asked, "What have you done with my dress? How much longer will it take?" Saeed was taken aback. They had agreed to meet in 2 days, but now, here she was. He explained that the sewing machine had broken down during the day and that he hadn't been able to fix it. He told her, "I'll start working on it tomorrow, once the machine is fixed." Before he could finish speaking, the girl interrupted him in a frightening voice. "Be careful not to play games with me. I want my wedding dress in 2 days. It must be ready. Do you understand or not? Remember that you promised to finish it in 2 days. I don't like people who break their promises. If you fail to keep yours, don't be upset later about what will happen to you." The tailor, Saeed, felt paralyzed with fear. He tried to lighten the mood and change her tone. So he said, "Okay, don't worry. Come back in 24 hours and you'll find the dress ready. God willing." After hearing this, the girl didn't say a word. She simply turned and left the shop. Saeed waited a minute before closing his shop and heading home. But when he stepped outside, he was shocked. The girl had vanished. He looked around the street left and right, but there was no trace of her. It was as if the ground had swallowed her whole. Saeed tried to convince himself that he was just imagining things due to exhaustion. He had been working hard all day, so he decided to go home and rest. That's exactly what he did. He went home, laid his head down, and slept. The next morning, he woke up and went to the shop to check if the sewing machine would work. He was shocked to find it running perfectly fine, with nothing wrong. How is this possible? He thought. Yesterday, I spent the whole day trying to fix it, and now, on the first attempt, it works like nothing ever happened. He started working on the girl's dress, but suddenly remembered that he hadn't turned on the Quran that morning, as he usually did. So he got up, switched on the Quran, and returned to his work. But the moment he did, the sewing machine broke down again, exactly like the day before. At that moment, Saeed made a chilling realization. The machine had been working before he played the Quran. But once he turned it on, it stopped. The same thing had happened yesterday. That's when he understood that this piece of fabric was not normal. There was something wrong with it. Determined to get to the bottom of this, Saeed decided to finish the dress as quickly as possible. He turned off the Quran and focused entirely on sewing. Strangely, despite its rough texture, the fabric was surprisingly easy to work with. In fact, it felt like it was sewing itself. Saeed was stunned, thinking, "This is the fastest dress I've ever sewn in my life." He managed to finish it that same day. Night fell, and Saeed anxiously waited for the girl. As expected, at exactly 1:30 in the morning, she entered. Saeed, filled with unease, wasted no time. He immediately handed her the dress. Without a word, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a large sum of money, and gave it to him. Saeed was shocked. The amount was far greater than what he usually charged. He suspected she didn't understand the value of money, so he said, "Oh, miss, this amount is too much. I don't deserve all of it." The girl didn't speak. She simply pointed at the money as if to say, "Take it, and don't ask questions." Then, without another word, she turned and left. Saeed stood there, stunned. It took only a few seconds before he snapped out of his daze and ran after her dearer. But when he reached the street, she was gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Despite his shock, Saeed couldn't ignore his happiness. The money she had given him was more than he could earn in an entire month. He returned home in high spirits, and his wife immediately noticed his unusual happiness. "What's going on?" she asked, curious about his excitement. Grinning, he replied, 2 days ago, A customer came in and asked me to sew her a dress. I finished it today and she rewarded me with a huge amount of money. His wife, delighted, said, "Well, take it out. Let's count it together." As soon as Saeed put his hand in his pocket to take out the money, he was hit with a shocking surprise. The money had turned into plain white paper. Saeed frantically searched his pockets, trying to confirm where the money had gone. His wife, noticing his strange behavior, began to suspect that her husband had lost his mind. Saeed's body started shaking uncontrollably and fear gripped him. At that moment, he decided to tell his wife and son the entire story. Before he could speak, his wife interrupted, saying, "Let's go to the shop now and check the remaining pieces of fabric from that girl. We'll take them to a sheikh and see what he says." Without hesitation, they rushed to the shop. But the moment they opened the door, they were met with another terrifying shock. All the remaining fabric had completely disappeared. Saeed and his family turned the shop upside down, searching every corner, but found nothing. At that moment, Saeed finally realized the horrifying truth. The girl who had come to him for a dress was not human. She was a jinn. Three of them returned home, their hearts pounding with fear. They thought the nightmare had ended, but they were wrong. That very night, Saeed had a strange and unsettling dream. He saw a massive wedding, but something about it was unnatural. The rituals being performed in the hall were unlike anything he had ever seen. The guests moved in ways that defied logic, and the entire atmosphere felt otherworldly. But the most chilling part was that he saw the dress, the same one he had sewn. The girl was wearing it. Saeed jolted awake, drenched in sweat and overcome with terror. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't recall the bride's face. Her features were shrouded in a misty fog, making it impossible to see her clearly. Seeking refuge from the nightmare, Saeed immediately performed ablution and prayed 2 rakas. Word of this eerie event quickly spread throughout Morocco, and soon nearly everyone in the region had heard the story. Fear gripped the townspeople, and many began avoiding Saeed. The rumor spread so widely and unnaturally fast that it took a toll on his livelihood. People were too afraid to visit his shop, unable to bear the fear and isolation. Saeed eventually grew to hate his profession. After a while, he made the difficult decision to close his shop for good. And so, the mystery remains. Was it just a coincidence? Or is there something far more terrifying lurking in the shadows? Some questions are better left unanswered. But one thing is certain, fear has no boundaries. If you've made it this far, you're braver than most. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you dare, subscribe and turn on notifications for more chilling tales. Until next time, but beware, something might already be watching you.